I'm going to open this shorts episode today with a slight modification, or actually not even a modification, a direct quote from one of the titular speeches that ever opened a movie, released 54 years ago this summer. A movie that very much defines and categorizes how we think of and what we think about America. I believe in America. America has made my fortune, and I raised my daughter, I raised my children in the American fashion. I gave them their freedom, but I taught them never to dishonor their family. Close quote. Now, while I may not agree fundamentally with where Bonacera wound up in his conversation with Vito Corleone, an immigrant criminal from Sicily, I too believe in America. I've raised my children in the American fashion. What this means is that I have raised them to believe in freedom, the right to pursue their individual dreams and passions, and I have raised them with a skepticism of broad, all-encompassing claims. Honor, tradition, family, community, these are words that we don't explicitly use in my household, but we expect that through osmosis and even by example, that the expectations under those concepts will filter somehow magically into the next generation. All of this makes my children almost perfectly Americans. And I believe in America. This year, 2026, marks the 250th anniversary of the signing, the ratification of the Declaration of Independence, written after a long summer in Philadelphia. And so we are going to begin our reading of the document that has created the country that I still, warts and all, believe in. A country that I hold is still a republic if we can keep it. I read from the Federalist Papers, the Signet Classics edition, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, with an introduction and notes by Charles R. Kessler. I flip to the back on page 528, and I start off our reading today. The Declaration of Independence in Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That wherever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such a government and to provide new guardrails for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden the governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be attained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless these people would relinquish the rights of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrants hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out our substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislature, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule to these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all causes whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an indistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince, whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondences. They too have been deaf to the voices of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of the mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And our sacred honor. This is quite possibly the greatest document outside of the Bible ever created by human beings. And this document began with a set of wild assertions. Wild for the late 18th century and wild even for the early part of our now 21st century. Happiness can be pursued. Governments merely secure rights already granted to us by a creator. And here's the big one, that there is actually a creator to appeal to that exists in the first place, above government, above society, and above even our tyrannies, both large and petty. The great challenges that this document presents have been pushed, prodded, questioned, doubted, and debated ever since it was signed in that summer in Philadelphia in 1776. And still, we haven't really come to any reasonable conclusions about it. Think about this. When you do something like this, when you put a document forward like this, and then you go forth to mix in a melting pot of different faiths, ethnicities, races, and classes, a giant question begins to loom. Can all of them actually live in practice and exist together in one unified nation without warring, without breaking apart, without factionalizing, without tribalizing, and while pursuing, but not necessarily always getting, happiness? That has been the grand question that lies at the basement, that lurks in the basement of this raucous experiment we're all running here on this third of the North American continent, and that the founding fathers themselves doubted would last even 20 years, much less 250. I opened up with Bonacera from that great movie, The Godfather, and Bonacera came from a majority Catholic country, as did Vito Corleone. The Protestant majority, back when religious differences actually really mattered in America, viewed the immigrant Italians with much suspicion for the majority of the 250 years of this country. And by the way, it didn't matter whether those Catholics were from Italy or from Ireland. In spite of that suspicion, immigrants came here legally, worked hard legally, had children they raised to speak English fluently, and believed, by dint of how they voted with their feet, in the promises laid out in the Declaration of Independence, ratified further in the Constitution, and walked out by the vast majority of us, warts and all, over the last 250 years. I believe in America, and I have raised my children, the next generation such as it were, to live, breathe, and move forward the American experiment in the American fashion. I call on all of you out there to hear the words of the Declaration of Independence, take them to heart, remember them, and do the same. Here's to another 250 years, America. And with that, well, we're out.
Well, if you liked that video, you should check out more by subscribing to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast playlist here on the HSCT Publishing YouTube channel. You can also get a copy of my third book, 12 Rules for Leaders, The Foundation for Intentional Leadership, co-written with Bradley Madigan. Check that out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere where you get ebooks today. And thanks.